On behalf of the Minnesota State Retiree Council, AFL-CIO, we are pleased to continue our conversation with Justice Paul H. Anderson, retired from the Minnesota State Supreme Court. Justice Anderson, are there overt attempts, that is, disenfranchisement, to take away that right to vote?
Absolutely. This is one of the sad things that I've witnessed in recent developments in electoral politics. As I indicated earlier, is that you have the self-disenfranchised, but you have the overt disenfranchisement. I mean, you know, Americans tend to be an optimistic lot, and they tend to, in the past, to have believe in their system. But we've had this effort to make people turn skepticism into cynicism, and I don't want to underestimate the impact of the 2000 election and the analysis that went on with respect to that election. People found out that the election process is not perfect. There are mistakes, and that has been exploited. And when I describe the election process, there's a whole spectrum of conduct. There can be incompetence by the voting judges. They're just incompetent. They can't do it. Or they're negligent. They know what they should do, but they get sloppy. Manipulation goes on, and is that most times all three of those are not illegal conduct. They're just human conduct that happens, and that's why Secretary of States are so important, because a good Secretary of States can eliminate all three of those conducts in elections. Now, the other two are the ones that are more insidious. It's either malpractice, malfeasance, or fraud. And but then even when you get to fraud, I mean, you can say that a felon on probation who thinks he can vote, that's more of a malfeasance instead of fraud. The actual fraud is where you do something very overtly illegal in order to direct the result. Interestingly enough, there is very little fraud in the electoral process, even though the parties that want to limit voting make a big deal of it. In fact, in the Coleman-Franken race, attorneys from both sides were before our court as officers of the court, and I asked the question, did you find any fraud in the Minnesota election? And they both answered unequivocally, no, they did not find fraud. I mean, there was malfeasance, there was negligence, owned that, and so it wasn't perfect. But one of the things that objective is to limit the pool of voters by raising the spectrum that there's a lot of fraud out there. There isn't.
What is self-disenfranchisement?
That is, for example, Dan, you decide you're not going to vote. Well, you do. And the reason is that I convince you that both of the candidates, and we see some of that in the current presidential election, you don't like either of them. And we are going to see advertisements that paint the candidates as being the worst type of person you could ever have. I mean, they describe them in the most seamy terms, and the reason that is that I want voters who's back my candidate, who are going to vote regardless of whatever is said, to go to the polls. I know that my opponent's hardcore voters are going to go to the polls, but I don't trust those people in the middle who could vote either way. They're undecided, or they're very discriminatory in how they're deciding one way or the other. So what do? I convince them that both candidates are really bad, and convince them that I will paint my opponent very bad, my opponent will paint me very badly, is that, but the ultimate objective is that I am going to encourage you to say, I don't like either of them. How could we have this horrible choice, and I'm not going to vote at all because I don't like either of them. That is a purposeful motive of many of these advertisements, to get you not to vote. And I would say to the average voter is that is the most unpatriotic decision you could make. Patriotism is defined as love and support for your country, and if you love this country, you need to be patriotic and show your love and support for this country by going out and voting.
Thank you, Justice Anderson. We need to redouble our efforts to get out the vote. Contact the Minnesota State Retiree Council, AFL-CIO, and see how you can help. We need your help. It is our patriotic duty to encourage the other people to vote, as it is their patriotic duty to vote. We need to work together. Thank you, Justice Anderson, for shedding light on voter suppression as we are approaching the November 8, 2016 election.